Listen, all you thought was the road march for Carnival 2020. Paddy is my road march. My road march, especially for the madness that we're dealing up with underneath this current government. So, let me be polite. Let me start nice. Good evening to everybody. Good evening, Marsha, Michelle, Ayana, Paula. Hello and hi to all of you that are on the live right now. I'm seeing a fair number of persons and I'm seeing comments and commentary from all. So, if you see I'm focusing so a little bit sometimes, it's because I'm looking at the monitor because I want to be able to sort out the things that I need to sort out. So, hey, I jumped in too fast. So, this is not live that I had planned to do immediately. I wanted to take my time because there were a bunch of things happening, going on. I think you all would be paying attention to my Facebook page and you're seeing that I'm trying to post as much as I possibly can on a daily basis, right? So I'm coming, putting up news as much as I can put up news. When I get information, I put the information out there as much as I possibly can. In some instances, at least in one instant, when I raised questions about a car accident and the possible involvement of a government minister in said car accident, the minister was up in the fields and toting, did at least 2 video responses to me, and then the 2 video responses wasn't enough. He then sent pen pal letters, right? So I've been getting pen pal letters from him that my attorneys are going to be responding to or in the process of responding to. And thereafter, there was some comments in other spaces and places. All you know, my position on things like that, if it is a legal matter or has become a legal matter, I'm not going to get into it until I am in a position to speak about it. So I could have come and said to you all, I got correspondence from a little friend, but my little friend couldn't wait. So as soon as he sent the correspondence, he then rushed to ensure that everybody knew about said correspondence. So I'm leaving it up to him to do all of the publishing of the matter prior to wherever it goes in terms of legal channels. And only when I think the legal channels are completed sufficiently, then I will have a word or two to say on that specific issue, right? But I feel that any other issue that he has been involved in or continues to be involved in outside of that specific issue, I will continue to comment on it. Listen, me ain't phased, you know. I ain't phased at all. I have dealt with so much shit from people in general, whether it is the opposition, whether it is the PNM, because don't get it twisted, I have dealt with my fair share of pressure from the People's National Movement, people inside the party, people outside the party who looking in but feel, well, that's the party they could support. I've dealt with all of it, right? Up to this morning, people flying in the inbox to say all kind of foolishness. And I just kind of looked on like, where people get the audacity from, boy? Anyhow, we here and we have a lot to cover. So good evening to New Source family and let me get into it. The first thing I want to cover is this, the definition of anti-blackness. Because when the firing of 19,810 CPEP contractors and workers happened, and in that same week there would have been URP announcements forestry workers' announcements. And prior to that, I would have been doing regular updates about board firings, state enterprises, Ministry of Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, RHAs, right, the freezes and the letting people go just before their contract ended. So it has been a long stretch of purging taking place across a range of ministries. Let me see if I remember them. Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, Ministry of Public Utilities, because there were some big firings there, and then of course some other low-key firings. Then there was the NGC board, the Plipdeco board, the Angostura board, and it was not just firing, it was the public demonizing of people on those boards. There was the NCC board as well. So a whole bunch of boards. Ministry of Youth and National Service, Youth Development and National Service. I'm forgetting all, but I am aware because there was the YAHP program where people were very concerned about what was going on. There, the young interns who were working in the Wassa pipe program where they were learning how to become certified plumbers. And it's a program that allowed them to learn and also was paying them a stipend. So that way you're earning something while you're learning. So it's not a situation where you're hand to mouth while you're trying to get a new skill under your belt. All of those things quashed and squashed immediately. And people, whole lives left in limbo. They're not sure what's the next step. And of course, it is creating a whole bunch of trauma, especially amongst the PNM, voter base. This thing dying to come up, boy. The PNM voter base. And we know that we tend to think that the PNM voter base is predominantly African descended voter base. And I'm not saying no. I'm also saying, bear in mind, that there are other ethnic groups inside there. And there are a couple other things I'll be saying about ethnic groups later on as well. But there's been a lot of trauma. There's been a lot of pain. There's been a lot of heartache in the last 2.5 months. And there were things that I was looking at. And I said, I ain't ready yet to do this live, But I thought I would come now. This morning I made a decision that I would come and do this live because there's too much that's building up. And by the time I'm ready, like ready to do the live, there might be too many things to cover in one go. And I'd be putting myself under stress, Ollie under stress, the dog's under stress because player don't know, Starboy sit down right outside the door and he is pissed. Like, why my evening had to be disturbed. So let's get into it as much as possible. So when the spate of firings happened, I put up a post, and the post knocked people in their feels, like it hit them under their rib cage, like it reached up underneath their ribs, and it stick in the sternum, and it ride their fucking chest. The statement was a very simple statement. All I said was, the firings at CPEP is an example of anti-blackness. Now, we live in a space where one of the worst things you could call a person is a racist. You could say all kinds of things about people, but the idea of being called a racist is a very taboo thing. Right? People get real jumpy and real sensitive about having their prejudices and bigotry pointed out. They don't like that at all because they know that deep down in their core, if the label applies, it means that they are guilty of not seeing other people as valuable human beings who are worthy of dignity. So, and this is a throwback from since the colonial era. And that's because white people didn't like anybody pointing out that they were in fact the monsters. They didn't like it. So you could say anything about them. But racist? No. Because racist meant that they weren't seeing everybody else as being on the same level as them. They didn't want to deal with the truth of what they are. I can't even say were. They didn't want to deal with the facts laid bare that the policies that they put in place, the systems they put in place, the institutions they put in place were all set up to protect them and oppress black people and other people of color, right? Other people from other ethnic groups. So white people didn't like that at all. But one of the things about colonization and the plantation system that built, well, the entire world's economy, right? But certainly that was the basis of our economies and political systems here, is the whole practice of anti-blackness. Now, anti-blackness is when you have decided that you're going to demonize people based on their perceived race, right? Their perceived features, and you're also going to demonize them, based on perceptions that you have about their culture. So there are lots of us, and plenty of the people who are practitioners of anti-blackness are themselves black, right? But you're going to find that you have people who will give you lip service, verbally tell you, I like black people, love black culture, love Trini identity and Trini culture. But there are a whole bunch of things that they have a problem with. And it comes out in little ways. You will hear them talk about people's hair, and the hair that they like and the hair that they don't like. You will hear them talk about complexion, the complexions that they prefer and the complexions that they don't prefer. You'll hear them talk about a range of features, the features that they're comfortable with, the features they're not comfortable with. You will also hear them talk about behaviors, a range of behaviors. And there are behaviors that they will identify as behaviors that they're comfortable with and behaviors that they're not comfortable with. And you will hear them talk about those behaviors in ethnic terms, in racist terms. So, let me bring up the image that has been trying to come up all evening long. So, what we have a lot of here in Trinidad and Tobago is anti-black racism, right? And I tend to use the shortened term for it, anti-blackness. And it is characterized by prejudice, collective hatred, and discrimination or extreme aversion towards people who are racialized as black. It is also a loathing of black culture worldwide. And what you will find is that loathing includes, but isn't limited to, the attribution of negative characteristics to black people. The fear, the strong dislike, the dehumanization of black people, and the objectification, especially sexual objectification and dehumanization of black women, men, and children. It ain't have nothing in that definition that is not correct about what we experience in our society on a regular basis. The minute I put up the post saying that what the government, the sitting UNC government, has done with respect to CPEP is anti-blackness, men was clutching the pearls. They quick run to set up a fake news account called The Ledger. And something tells me $50 the $50 fella is who behind that page, right? So they quick set it up. And the first thing they post about is me talking about anti-blackness. Now, I am clear that on social media these days is I run things. And I'll tell you why I'm clear about that. The number of pages and accounts and profiles that I have seen been set up from April 29th to now, just to target my page. The number of strange persons who I don't know at all, from Adam, Eve, or Steve, who come in to follow my personal profile. And most of them, men of East Indian descent, just showing up all of a sudden to follow my profile. Now, I know for a long time that I have had a special appeal for East Indian men. I didn't know it was so bad. I really didn't know it was so bad. That these men who never meet me in life, suddenly just following Rhoda on social media. And all I post in on my personal profile is dog videos when the day come. So I'm like, is dog videos all you're interested in so? Or they could go on Instagram and look at them? Like, really? So I realized that all of the activity on my page has riled up a lot of people. And the reason I give all of the definition of anti-blackness is a lot of what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this evening is tied into anti-blackness. A lot of Kamala Persad-Bissessa's government's policies and operation for the last 2.5 months, and I imagine for the foreseeable future, is set in anti-blackness. Now this isn't new to her. Hold a second. There are people on the live who are having problems and they don't realize that I can ban people from the live right here. So I'm going to exercise my power and ban a couple persons. Yes, Pearl says something here that is important, and I'm going to put it up on the screen for you all to see. She says anti-blackness is like always referring to black people as lazy and black men as rapists. Correct. So this feeds into the point that I was going to make. Anti-blackness ain't new to the UNC. It isn't new as a policy for them. Color Me Orange. Color Me Orange was based in anti-blackness. The illegal state of emergency in 2011 was set in and entrenched in anti-blackness because Kamala gave us the story that there was a threat from Latin America, and that was the reason for the calling of the state of emergency. I don't know how many of you all remember that, right? The Sunday night when she sat down in her bedroom with 3 men around her, right? I think it was Prakash, Jack Warner, and Anand Ram Logan. I might be wrong, but it was Kamala with 3 members of her government around her, there on her bed in her nightie, giving the country the announcement that we were going into a state of emergency. This is before she spoke to the president, so there was no presidential proclamation before the country heard. All right, and one of these days I will get back to how that happened and its connections to the state of emergency that we had earlier this year. But tonight is not the night for that. So Kamala calls a state of emergency as Prime Minister from her home, her private home. And she tells people that the reason for the state of emergency has to do with a threat coming from Latin America, right? That the government has viable information that there is a threat from Latin America. I remember that her security advisors and other people, her political surrogates at that point in time, were all over the television programs, the news programs, feeding us the story of this threat from Latin America. That was day 1.5 of the state of emergency. Then by day 1 3/4 of the state of emergency, we start hearing that the greatest threat the country is facing is the threat of young black males from single parent homes. Annan Ram-Logan as Attorney General and John Sandy as Minister of National Security were the two people who got onto news programs thereafter running with the narrative that the threat the country was facing was from young black males from single parent homes. They even gave an age group, right? I think 18 to must be 30 something. I've forgotten the age that they gave. But young black males from single parent homes. And that is what they use as justification for creation of hotspots and locking up 8,000 men without any process at all. So a state of emergency is called. People's rights are suspended. And of course, the government is in a position now to allow the TTPS to arrest people. So 8,000 young men were locked up. And a friend of the UNC got a contract to set up a detention center down in Santa Rosa. And that person was paid by the government to house these persons detained during the state of emergency. 3 months later, when the state of emergency ended, it was only marijuana charges and child support charges that anybody had to face any sort of consequences for. Nothing to do with crime. No big fish was caught. It was catch and release. That's what happened. Catch and release. But for 3 months, Kamala had the entire country thinking that the young black male population from single parent homes was the biggest problem that the country was facing in terms of crime. When that state of emergency occurred within the first week, I saw people who I thought were friends of mine, people who were from different ethnic groups to me, right? Some of them sharing some of my ethnicity. Some of them might be my ethnicity, but in a different class group. So upper middle class, upper middle income, right? Heaving a sigh of relief. Glad to see the government locking up people. There is a young man who was my friend, my good friend, up until the night Kamala called the state of emergency. This boy, while Kamala giving she reason in she nighty on she bed, this boy calls me, and he was of East Indian origin. He's of East Indian descent, Muslim Indian. And he calls and he's there saying, this is a good idea, this is important, this is a big move. And I was like, why are you saying that? Because I work in a secondary school. I am well aware that the problems ain't coming from one ethnic group. The problems coming from homes that are facing particular social circumstances. It so happens that in some communities, it is predominantly young black, young African descended homes that are dealing up with those issues. But it is not a situation where those issues are specific to young African homes, African descended homes. Because I was at that point in time working in a REMA. So wide range of makeup in terms of ethnicity in my classrooms. You had people of African descent, people of East Indian descent, Coco Payal. I even had people who their parents were from Venezuela, like first generation Venezuelan descendants at that point in time. So you're dealing up with a situation where you know that the problems is not to do with this. The problems are to do with social conditions, economic constraints, and the kind of services that different people have access to. And my boy telling me at that point in time we were having a Google chat, right? Google chat was a big deal at that point in time. My boy is telling me that this is a good thing. This is going to solve the crime problem. And I said, but how? Because if you're targeting only persons from single parent homes that are young black males of African descent, what about the other people who involved in criminal activity? And not for love nor money could he see the point that I was making. By the end of that first week, I was blatantly saying to people, this crime plan, this state of emergency is based on race. And I want you all to understand this, because Kamala had a majority in government then, right? 26-10 was the layout in terms of the seats won. 26 MPs. And I will never forget that, because I looked at that parliamentary debate when they were debating the state of emergency and the need for it. I sit down and I watch, because at that point in time, remember, is UNC, MSJ, oh my goodness, what is the NJAC, right? So UNC, MSJ, NJAC, Congress of the People, and Cucumbers and Pumpkin Man. I forget the name of that party. Whoever remember the name of that party, tell me in the chat window. Those political parties, because I remember the representatives from Tobago was Delmon Baker and Shopping Toppin. I can't remember the name of the party. Somebody wants me to get rid of somebody. I don't know who this somebody is, but whenever they comment again, I'll get rid of them. Don't worry. Right. So they have this debate, and all 26 persons from the People's Partnership get up and defend it, and they all make the argument about young black males from single parent homes being the largest criminal problem that we are facing as a society. Right, top. Thank you very much. I couldn't remember. Top. Right, good. And I remember looking at the debate. I was, at that point in time, the first person to live tweet a debate. So since then, that's what, 2011, I running things in terms of social media, right? I cut in track and everybody else following. So I listened to the entire debate and I was live tweeting what each person got up to say. I live tweeted and indicated that this was their position, this was their stance. 26 persons, some of them of African descent, some of them of East Indian descent, some of them mixed race descent. And they all got up and ran with the narrative, even though there was no evidence that young black males from single parent homes was the largest crime problem this country was facing. It was then and there that I knew that the UNC was a racist government. At that point in time, it was the People's Partnership. And nothing has happened since then to change my mind. One of the other things that Kamala did in her first 63-month term was live sport. Live sport was another program that was steeped in anti-blackness because it was set up to keep criminal elements from specific communities and specific gangs paid to stay quiet, not creating a program that would allow people to earn a legitimate living, develop skills, and give back to their society. And I'm going to make that point again. Live sport was not a program that allowed people to earn a legitimate living, build skills, provide for their families, and give back to the community that they are in. That is going to come in important later down in this broadcast. So Kamala established for me very plainly within her first 63 months in office that she was focused on delivering governance in a particular way. Anti-blackness was very, very critical to how she went about positioning herself. So that's why her 2015 campaign did not surprise me, and her 2020 campaign did not surprise me, and her 2025 campaign did not surprise me either, because there were elements, core elements of dog whistling and anti-blackness in those campaigns. So it stands to reason, if Kamala has been showing this particular trend and pattern of behavior in terms of political campaigns and in terms of policies, that coming into office in 2025, there's not going to be a significant change. So I was kind of surprised that people were so worried and so up in their feels when I pointed out that the shutdown of the CPEP program is anti-blackness. And I'm going to get into the CPEP program a little bit later. But we here seem to have a serious problem with seeing people of African descent get anything in this society. Public education, big problem. Eric Williams had to fight the planter class back in the 1960s, 50s and 60s to allow for the common entrance exam, to allow for children to be able to have more access to education. There was a fight with secondary school programs as well, because they wanted to keep all of the secondary school programs a particular way. So the opening up of technical vocational programs in the 60s and 70s was a big problem. Why? Because if you open up those programs and you make them available to people, they can build skills and then become entrepreneurs. They could earn money for themselves. They're not going to be dependent on other people for how to earn money. So education became a huge site of dispute. And you're going to see under Kamala, education is going to become a huge site of dispute again. Leopard don't change spots. I will not be shocked or surprised when the things happen. The point that I'm trying to make is anti-blackness is not a strange thing here. There are very many policies where you will see oppression and trying to squeeze people out and trying to push people down based on how they have been racialized, based on us deciding, based on these features, this complexion, this geographic origin, you deserve to be oppressed. That's the issue, you know. In their heads, they have decided, based on these list of things, you deserve to be oppressed. And that is my issue with the slate of firings that have taken place from the end of April to now. That basically the sitting government, whose responsibility it is to look after all citizens equitably, has decided equitable only exists for my people. And I get to define and determine who my people is. Right? And so everybody else who's living here, legitimate citizens, paying taxes, have to be worried. Am I next? Is it going to be my job next? Is it me? And in the midst of all of that, everybody want to walk around, nose up in the air, as a good person. I'm not anti-black. I'm not racist. I'm not prejudiced. As a good person. Fuck, we were totally on that. Right, let me try and get back on track now. So, this week, no, not this week, last week. Last week, the nation of Trinidad and Tobago would have experienced, I think, for the first time, a national satsang. I have been to many satsangs in my life and yugs. I think generally people just call them pujas, right? But you have different types of prayer services for different things. And one of the types of prayer services you can have is a satsang. Now, I wasn't expecting a satsang, and your girl was sleeping, right? Your girl was sleeping, and a partner of mine, let me call him Danny. Danny, my partner, and Danny is like me, of East Indian descent. He not mixed up, to the best of my knowledge. He related to me on my father's side. Danny messaged me. As a matter of fact, Danny messaged wake me up from sleep, because your girl was having a good hard sleep that afternoon. And when I see the messages coming in, he was like, "You're watching this thing?" I was like, no. I was having a nap. He's like, "Well, nah. If I watching it, you ought to watch it too." So Danny makes me get up, go in my living room, turn on my TV, go to YouTube, and start to watch this thing. Now, while I searching through and looking for the thing, Danny messaging, right? So message after message after message. He's like, "This to represent us. This is now we culture. This alone is now we culture. It has so many other things that they could be depicting. Why is only this? Why it only focus so?" And I'm like, I ain't start to watch the thing yet, So by the time I start to watch the thing is the part that down in Cuba. So I had to ask him, what went on in the airport? So he say, well, it had some dancers, it had some okojambi, it had some tassa, and then after that, he say, it become this thing. He said, but this is not we. It had more to we than this. And then he's like, Rhoda, if you was representing Trinidad and Tobago and you visited another country, what you want to see? You want to see the country's culture, or you want to see your culture represented in that country? I say, well, it depends. And in all fairness, it depends. Because if I visited India, for example, and there are resonances between my country and India, I would expect that they would put on display mostly their culture, but they would also give me touches of my culture. So when I turned on the TV and was watching the national satsang, I say, well, where's the agenda here? Where's the objective? What are we trying to achieve? Because that's a critical thing. When you see things like that, actually, when you see anything at all, you have to ask yourself, what we trying to achieve? Was the purpose here? Was the point of this? And I watched it, and I arrived at a conclusion. But before I get into the conclusion, let me go through what happened. So there are plenty of people who might know what a satsang is. So let me help all you out. That's how the word is spelled. And it means a company of truth. And I want us to remember that a satsang means a company of people gathered for the truth. Because that didn't happen at that event. There was a company of people, but I don't know that them people were gathered for the truth. So, the satsang starts. Before the satsang happened, we were fed with this image. The country saw this image released by Barry Padarat to let us know that the government was busy planning. So you had Chuff Chuff sleeping on himself, Nicholas Morris doing God knows what, because everybody knows he undereducated, so he probably can't read or write. And Barry sitting in the corner looking on because Barry is the Prime Minister. And at the back of the room, some very bored public servants. Now, the question you have to ask yourself, after having seen that satsang, and after having sat in traffic 2 days in a row because highway get blocked off, what he asked them was planning. What were they planning? Because that event in Cuba can't be what they was planning. Cannot. Or they call all them people into a meeting. Let me go back to the picture. Barry, Chuff Chuff, and Wilfred, you know. Barry, Chuff Chuff, and Wilfred sit down in a room with public servants, and the best them three could come up with was what we see there last week. Really? Because to me, that's what I had to study. That the three of them sit down in a room. The three of them sit down in a room with public servants and felt, well, we had to take a picture and put this out for the people to know what we're doing. And last week, that presentation in the airport and in Presal, that was the best the three of them could have come up with as a representation of what Trinidad and Tobago culture is about. So, Barry, Chuff Chuff, and Wilfred decided they would give Modi a little taste of diversity. So in the airport, you get some dancers, you get some moko jambi. Nothing wrong with that. Then Modi was greeted by armed services here. Nothing wrong with that. Then Tassa. Nothing wrong with that. Then Chowtals sung in Bhojpuri. Nothing wrong with that. Up to this point, I was like, good. Because you saw some aspects of culture that could be African-descended culture from Trinidad, maybe African-descended culture from Tobago, because of course, I am always mindful that this is a twin island republic. Tassa, representing the Muslim contribution to Trinidad and Tobago, whether you are African Muslim or Indian Muslim, Muslim contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. Good. Chowtal, not an issue at all. Because Chowtals, especially Bhojpuri Chowtals, are songs that East Indian immigrant laborers would have brought here with themselves back in 1845. A lot of people think that Indians, the majority of Indians that came here, spoke Hindi. No, Hindi was not the language. It was Bhojpuri, it was Urdu, a couple other languages, maybe a little bit of Tamil, right? But you had people from diverse set of areas coming out of India. Bhojpuri was one of the most significant languages coming out of India. And so Modi would have been able to identify with the language. I don't hear a lot of Bhojpuri anymore, except for when people using one word here and there. So I think it would have been a good experience for him to come off a plane after having left India, from whenever he left India, to hear a language that he would associate only with India, not necessarily with the Caribbean. So I heard that part and I was like, nice, cool, good. Where I started to get concerned is when we got down to Presal. Because you have this program, Namaste Modi, and again, we didn't even have a problem with the name of the program, right? Oh, no, sorry, that's the diplomatic doubles. We ain't ready for that yet. You have this program called Namaste Modi. Where did I? Right. You have them down in the, was it the Atto Bolden Stadium or the Velodrome down in Cuba. And the entire program is created to replicate only a specific aspect of Indian culture in Trinidad and Tobago. You chuck in a little bit of steel pan and everything else was reflective strictly of Hindu Indian culture in Trinidad and Tobago. And I pause and I say to myself, what is really going on here? And it took me a couple days. And then I realized why. We forget that Kamla fell out with the Hindu community in Trinidad and Tobago. I forgot. So it's only 2 or 3 days ago, as I thinking about it and wondering, why was that the approach? Because you see, I don't ever think that things just happening on the surface just so. So if you'll remember, throw your mind back, in 2023 for the local government elections, Kamla broke with the Hindu community. The Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha disowned Kamla, didn't run any aspect of her local government campaign on their media house programs, right? So not on their television station or on their radio. As a matter of fact, most of their social media blocked Kamla, banned Kamla entirely. So there was a huge break between her and the religious representatives of the of the Hindu community. That whole satsang last week was Kamla's way of making back up with the Hindu community that she has ignored, because they were ignored in her 2023 local government campaign, and they were also ignored in the 2025 general election campaign. So Kamla is once again wooing, trying to make back up, trying to mend fences with the Orthodox Hindu community, so that way, whenever she ends up going back into an election, she can appeal to them for their votes. That is what this whole bacchanal was about, because they didn't make up. They haven't yet made up. There's not yet been any public sighting of Kamla Prasad Bisesa with any of the religious leaders of the Hindu community. So this was a public performance by Kamla to show, I am still Hindu. Remember when Kamla swearing? She didn't swear in on the Bhagavad Gita. You'll remember that, right? That she chose to swear in on the Constitution. So you have this situation where Kamla doesn't necessarily have the support of the Orthodox Hindu community in Trinidad and Tobago. And so she uses this program, this visit that ought to have been positioned as a national identity visit. She uses it to hone in on the Orthodox Hindu community. Because if you listen to Modi's address to the parliament the following day, Modi makes a huge effort in his address to talk about all of the various aspects of our identity here that is not just of East Indian extract. So he talks about the Creole language meeting Bhojpuri. He talks about steel pan and tabla. He talks about cricket. He talks about calypso. He talks about all of those things. But Kamla and her organizing committee, I can't get over this picture earlier, sorry. Kamla and her organizing committee of Bim Bam and Jackass decided that they're going to take over $1 million of our resources and throw a satsang to allow Kamla Prasad Bisesa to woo and try and make back up with the Orthodox Hindu community. So no embracing of any other aspect of our cultural identity in that event in Presal. Only one concept of Trinidad and Tobago's identity. And so it tells you that Kamala is desperate for the support of the Orthodox Hindu community. And she's desperate because if an election called tomorrow and she make back up with them, pressure. Because I think by now, after 2.5 months of Kamala in government, the 100,000 people who didn't vote or didn't feel moved to vote on the 28th of August, or April, sorry, and don't get me wrong, me and John B and them, their decision, their choice. I don't have an issue with people deciding that they want to vote or don't want to vote. But I think the 100,000 who didn't feel moved to vote on April 28th, if you tell them it have an election tomorrow and they had a vote, I feel they're showing up. Full 100,000 to vote. Yeah? Yeah. Right. So that is the national satsang. We could... Oh, it have a couple other things I want to talk about that happened in that satsang. Because remember, a satsang is people coming together, a group of people coming together for truth, right? And so there was a lot of no truth or hypocrisy.
COVID-19. COVID-19.
Hundreds of thousands were given a fake vaccine.
Say what?
Hundreds of thousands were given a fake vaccine. And Dr. Roshan Parasram shamelessly he was awarded the Order of Trinidad and Tobago.
You're lying to me.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Under your leadership, India has extended its hand to the world, but never more so through your compassion, through your benevolence, with the vaccines initiative 4 years ago.
Now you're all in big, big trouble.
When COVID-19 pandemic brought the world to its knees, while some other countries were hoarding medical supplies, you, sir, you ensured that vaccines and supplies reach even the smallest nations, including Trinidad and Tobago.
Anybody else remember that Kamala is the person that was telling people don't get vaccines? Anybody else remember that Kamala was the person telling people that sunlight will kill COVID? Anybody else remembers that Kamala told the country last year that the vaccines killed people and that they should sue the state for forcing them to take vaccines when nobody was forced to take vaccines? The government brought in vaccines. The government encouraged people to take vaccines. I mean, there was a lot of encouragement and a lot of coaxing of people to take vaccines, but it was never made mandatory that you had to have the vaccines. And now, my girl, in a gathering for truth, stands up and pretends that she was pro-vaccine all this time, pretends that she wasn't one of the first persons to come out and tell people, don't take them vaccines from India. I remember the UNC doing that back in, was it 2021 or 2022, when we first started getting vaccines here. Because one of the first or earliest shipments of vaccines came from India. And thereafter, we would have gotten a lot of vaccines from China, the Sinopharm vaccines. And I remember that those vaccines that came in were undermined. They were spoken of as if they were fake, as if the quality of the vaccines were cheap. And yet, my girl, basking in the glow of the work that Dr. Rowley, Stuart Young, Dr. Brown, Terence Dayal Singh would have done, pretending as if she was all about the vaccines all the time. Yes, correct. Kamala was the one to say that she will build a dome to keep people safe from COVID. In 2020, normal. I will build a dome. The dome will keep us safe. The dome will keep out the virus. To sort of seem That same person, sunlight will kill sunlight will kill COVID, and I will build a dome, coming to tell people, thank you for the vaccine. You know, these wonderful gifts that you gave us that we were so grateful for. She was grateful. So you see what I tell you? While a satsang is a gathering of people for the purpose of truth, there was very little truth at that event. There was very, very little truth at that event. What you would have had was performance and papi show, not truth. You could have done better than that, Kamala. With over $1 million, you could have done better than that. Okay, so we can move on. So this is a government that has decided that it ain't going to be accountable to us at all. We have moved from having Finance and General Purpose Committee meetings and cabinet meetings and then post-cabinet press conferences to the sitting government not having a press conference for the last 2 to 3 weeks, not having Finance and General Purpose meetings, certainly to the best of my knowledge. And now, in not having those meetings, they have resorted to going back to political meetings that bars them from being held to account because nobody is in a position to ask them hard questions.
Let we go. When he rum, tell you you's a big dancer. Come show them you's a big dancer. Bend down if you's a big dancer. Waistline cause you's a big dancer. When he rum, tell you you's a big dancer. Come show them you's a big dancer. Let we go. When he rum, tell you you's a big dancer. Come show them you's a big dancer. Bend down if you's a big dancer. Waistline cause you's a big dancer. When he rum, tell you you's a big dancer. Come show them you's a big dancer.
So we have gone from accountability and transparency at meetings to campaigning and avoiding accountability in the public domain. Now there are a range of things that Kamala and her government are doing that we need to be very concerned about. Distractions are one. So last night in that meeting, she would have talked about raising the drinking limit to 21 and gambling and smoking ganja to the age of 25. What Kamala doesn't say is, where's the law enforcement aspect of this? Because we don't enforce the law as it stands now for people who are 18 and under or under 18 who are drinking alcohol or gambling or smoking marijuana. So if you're not incorporating law enforcement in the policy, what's the point of the policy? How is it treating with crime? As a matter of fact, what are the crimes that you are treating with this particular policy where you're shifting age? And if you say that you have to be 25 and over to be able to do these things, how is it that somebody who is 18 years of age, free to vote, somebody who is 17 years of age, free to get their license and drive, but you have to wait to be 25 to be able to drink alcohol, to smoke marijuana, not cigarette smoking or vaping, marijuana specifically, right? And you have to wait until 25 to be able to gamble. Where does policy come from? Or where this group of policies come from? What set of crimes is it meant to be tackling in that way? How does it fit into the larger whole? Because I'm not clear. I could understand with alcohol, maybe the argument is that young people on alcohol driving car accidents, maybe. And in that instant, the issue then has to become enforcement of the law. The bartenders and parties not supposed to be selling alcohol or giving alcohol to people who are under the age of 18. And outside of events, you should have those breathalyzer traps set up so that you could stop people and make them sit out and drink some water and catch yourself before they drive. So where are we going with this? And so that's why I think a lot of the announcements made last night are actually distractions. And distractions from the foolish decision by her to not go to Caricom. But we're going to get to Caricom just now, because I want to cover a range of the other ways in which Kamala is failing to be accountable. So we had this take place. NGC appointed a chairman and fired a chairman. And up to now, nobody know why the chairman get fired. Right? So we know that this young man, who is quite qualified, was appointed as the chairman. And then we know a couple of weeks into his appointment, somehow he is no longer the chairman of the board. And nobody has come out to clarify. And Kamala has carefully avoided any press conferences since the whole NGC debacle happened, because the day that the news broke, I should say the day that I broke the news. So the day that the news broke was a Thursday. And that Thursday, my girl tell the media she having a post cab. And people wait. They wait until 7, 8 o'clock outside the Red House. And she never came outside, never held a press conference, and has not held a press conference since. So she has not answered any questions on NGC. She has not answered any questions on the central bank governor. She has not answered any questions on the 20,000 plus people that she has fired or has had her ministers fire in the last 2.5 months. So this is what I'm told is a new heritage board. Kurt Ramlal as chairman, Khalid Hassan Ali, Lincoln Dukran, Ronnie Suku, Richard Hansraj, and Kamini Ramraj. Now, I think everybody has noticed that after the first 3 or 4 boards that had token representatives from the African descended community, Kamala's boards have since been strictly Indo-descended boards. So the people are all persons of East Indian descent. That is problematic. What is even more problematic is that it appears to be that it is predominantly or strictly persons of East Indian descent. And all of them somehow, or most of them somehow, seem to have been linked to scandals in her first term in office. You have Kurt Ramlal, who is the chairman. And this is Kurt. Kurt was linked to a bacchanal in or around 2013, somewhere thereabouts, with the Penal Hospital and SNC Lavalin. Kurt, I am told, is also a campaign manager for the UNC and was instrumental in campaign ads that would have been designed in the 2020 and 2025 election. And as you all know, the 2020 election especially had some incredibly racist ads. So why would you decide that the person you're putting as the chairman of Heritage, an important energy company, is somebody whose name was called in Bacchanal back in your first term in office, and who is known to be one of the creative persons, right, or one of the persons behind campaigns that were divisive in nature? Like, why? And so that's the question you had to ask yourself and let the answer settle in. See why I feel quite comfortable in saying that this sitting government is anti-black in its policies and approach. And I say it unapologetically. I know all you could think, all you could want to come for me. Do it. Go through hard. Remember my position. If you're coming at me, don't miss. Don't miss. So we have the issue of these boards, and boards being named, boards being appointed, and no questions being asked because they're not putting themselves in a position to answer questions. Because by now, we should have been in a position to ask, well, why is this person going to be back there? This person was involved in SNC Lavalin. This person's name was called in this, that, and the other. How come we're not in a position to ask those questions? This government does not want to be held to account. This government's support base also thinks that it is above being held to account. And what you need to remember is that for the PNM's 9.5 years in office, it was held to account every day, every week. It was held to account, and it presented itself, whether through the Prime Minister, line ministers, the various boards, in Parliament, in post-cabinet press conferences. It presented itself to be held to account. Kamla cannot face scrutiny. Can't face scrutiny at all. And it is glaringly apparent that what she plans to do is avoid scrutiny and at the same time effect a reign of terror. So let me see, where am I at now? No, I don't want to jump into Caricom just yet. So this is an example of a lack of accountability and transparency. You have a conflict of interest here, or potential conflict of interest. This guy, Dane Mirage, is on the WASA executive. WASA falls under the Ministry of Public Utilities. I'm told that Dane Mirage has been earmarked to be the CPEP chairman. CPEP, as you well know, no longer falls under local government and rural development. It now falls under public utilities. So he works in the Ministry of Public Utilities. Not in the ministry. He works for one of the entities that falls under the Ministry of Public Utilities, and he sits, if my information is correct, he sits as the chairman of the CPEP company, which falls under the Ministry of Public Utilities. I would like the media to be in a position to ask Prime Minister Barry Padarat or Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar what's really going on. Or they don't have enough people to diversify the range of appointments. And I'm not even talking about ethnicity. The same person on the WASA exec and chairing a company. Come on, man. Come on, man. So there are a couple other things that we need to pay attention to. And one of them is Dave Tanku, who doesn't seem to know his ass from his elbow.
Today, Mr. Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago has a mere 7.5 months of import cover. We have foreign exchange to only last this country 7.5 months of imports.
A few moments later.
Here today speaking, and he says that the former government left this economy in a shambles. Then he proceeds to say that there were only 8 months of import cover, Mr. Speaker. The shock and horror. For energy-producing countries like Trinidad and Tobago, the benchmark, international benchmark, is 6 months, Mr. Speaker. Trinidad and Tobago is at 8 months of import cover due to the masterful management of this difficult economy by the People's National Movement, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance is confused.
Imagine Brian Manning hand you your ass. Right? Imagine you appoint Dave Tanku to be your Minister of Finance, coming on the heels of Colm Imbut, right? Some big shoes to fill. We all know this. It is glaringly apparent now that Imbut, engineer, yes, but certainly a more effective Minister of Finance than Tanku could ever be. And here you have Brian Manning reading you for filth in the Parliament because you don't even understand Forex reserves. Which tells me that you, Dave Tanku, didn't talk to the technocrats in the Ministry of Finance. I looked at Dave's speech and it was clear to me that the technocrats didn't write that speech. Or if the technocrats wrote a speech, he put a whole bunch of fluff and stupidness over the speech that was written for him. Because that mid-year review didn't cover anything to do with the energy sector, where the energy sector was, what price they were pegging oil and gas at. Nothing like that was apparent in the early stages of the speech. And if you, as a Minister of Finance, don't understand that 6 months is the standard for Forex reserves. So if we have 8 months, which has been the usual practice with Imbut. So if you go back to any of Imbut's budget speeches or mid-year review speeches, he constantly talks about what is the nature of our Forex reserves and how many months we are covered for with respect to our Forex reserves. And it has never fallen under 8 months. Tanku didn't know that. Tanku responsible for the economy. And Tanku didn't know that. Brian Manning had to show up and school Tanku. Right? Sit down and let that simmer in your brain. That Brian had to school Dave. And Dave in big portfolio and all. So, was there something else I wanted to look at, boy? Maybe. Oh, this other girl last night in the meeting.
So everything was in shambles. The Board of Indian Revenue has, yes, MPs and senators, yes. And look, so everything was in shambles. The Board of Indian Revenue has, yes, MPs and senators, yes. And local government too. Agree.
You see my girl's state? This is the same person who talking about age limit for alcohol and marijuana and gambling. See my girl's state? Right. I have nothing else to say. Talk done. Right. Oh, just now. Clear that off. Good. Kamla Prasad-Bissessar is avoiding accountability to the regional community as well. That's why she didn't go to Caricom. She can't face anybody at Caricom right now. The Caricom meetings, if I am not mistaken, are held currently in Jamaica this year, right? Montego Bay. And if it is in Jamaica, at Montego Bay, I want to remind you all that back in 2010, Kamla Prasad-Bissessar insulted the entire Caricom at a meeting in Jamaica at Montego Bay. So can you imagine, after having insulted an entire region and having done a range of things over that period from 2010 to 2025, showing up at meetings to talk about improved trade and improved ties and improved measures. She can't do it. But let's have a little retrospective of Kamla from 2005, thereabouts, come forward. So a 20-year retrospective of Kamla Prasad-Bissessar. So few people, I think, remember that this was Kamla in or about 2010, right? She went up to Caricom as Prime Minister and, you know, my girl was the talk of the town back then. This is 2010. I want to jump back a little bit to 2005. So in 2005, Kamala as the opposition leader at that point in time, jump up with your good self in we hot parliament and say, it have enough Indians in the Caribbean Court of Justice, right? That she look at the selections on the panel to the people to be judges, and she ain't seen any Indians, and so we shouldn't join the CCJ. This is in the Caribbean that is 80% African descended, right? It didn't have any Chinese, it didn't have any white judges, there were no Portuguese judges, there were no indigenous, there were no judges of indigenous blood and descent. It was predominantly African descended persons who were on the panel of judges. What Kamala's statement was basically saying is that for you to be an efficient, effective, unbiased, impartial judge, you can't be of African descent. See what I mean when I tell you that anti-blackness is a serious thing? Because imagine that you as an opposition leader in a country where roughly 35% of the population is of African descent, you feel confident enough to get up in a parliament and say that if it have more judges of East Indian descent on a panel, the panel biased, which is to say, black people biased, black people incapable of being impartial. That's what she's saying. So she is not judging, pardon the pun here, judges based on their merit and their abilities. She is basing her thoughts on judges on their ethnicity. So you can only be seen as an effective judge, as an impartial judge, if you are of East Indian descent. And this is what she left on the Hansard for us, because this is a story from February 2005. I'm reading down at the bottom where she says, she also criticized the composition of the CCJ, saying it did not reflect the population of the Caribbean. You have appointed 6 judges. We are living in a country, and they say we call in race, but this is blatant. Not a single one of Indo-Trinidadian or Indian origin, she said, to supportive table thumping. How can that be when half the population in this country is of Indian descent? I want to remind you all, this is not the Supreme Court in Trinidad. This is not the Court of Appeal in Trinidad. This is not the High Court in Trinidad. This is the Caribbean Court of Justice, where the Caribbean is 80% African descent. All right? I'm going to leave that there. Because when I remind people that Kamala back in 2005 said she can't support the Caribbean Court of Justice because they don't have enough Indians on it, people say to me, Rhoda, that can't be true. Rhoda, making that up. So here's the evidence. And I'm leaving it here for a couple seconds so you could look at the date, the year, the time, Thursday, the 3rd of February, 2005. Kamala Persad-Bissessar is reported as having said this in the parliament, which means that it is on the Hansard that Kamala Persad-Bissessar, as opposition leader, said it didn't have enough Indians on the CCJ. And so, because of that, Trinidad and Tobago can't join the CCJ. This is why progress has been held back, We could be out of the Privy Council, except for the United National Congress. That's the only holdback from us joining the CCJ. Then in 2010, Kamala made this statement. She said, Trinidad and Tobago is not an ATM to the Caribbean. She made that statement in Montego Bay. Then in 2014, she said the CCJ is not a priority for her. And that's 2010. Thereafter, she spent 10 years in the wilderness of the opposition, saying all kinds of things, all kinds of foolish things. Then early this year, Big Bacchanal fires the head of the CEO of Wassa, who is Bajan. So of course, we have insulted our Bajan neighbors with our treatment of the CEO or the former CEO of Wassa. And so it comes as no surprise to anybody at all that Kamala skips the first Caricom summit as Prime Minister. And this morning, this selfie was posted up by the Jamaican Prime Minister and the other heads of government that are there with him in Jamaica. And so you're seeing St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you're seeing Guyana, I think that's Suriname at the very front there with him. I'm not 100% certain, but he posted this selfie right after they had an important meeting. Now, that meeting, if I am not mistaken, was this meeting that was posted if you're not hearing anything, it's because Sean Sobers shared a video without sound. Right? Sean Sobers or Sean Sobers' team, people at his ministry, his social media people, shared an entire video of Sean Sobers participating in a meeting at the Caricom summit, and it was silent, volume off. So let's take it in again. And bearing in mind that Sean Sobers, his team of people, shared a video with no audio for the population. So we have no idea what he said at the meeting. We have no idea what the meeting is about. We have no idea what feedback was given to him in the room after he said the thing that he said that was muted. I can't with this government, you know. The meeting was about external negotiations, right? I put the video up on News Source page so you can go and read the caption for the meeting. The meeting was about external negotiations, an important meeting. How you gonna put that up? No audio. We not serious, yes. We not serious. Woo. So that is Caricom. So Missy, she can't attend Caricom meetings. She can't hold her face up in Caricom meetings. And of course, I'm told that there are other health complications as well. And now we come to the crux of the matter. So let we go.
In less than 2 months of Yellow is the Curse, in less than 2 months of the UNC's government, you now have 19,810 people unemployed, fired, not renewed.
Because if you are saying that those workers have no affiliation with CPEP, they are engaged by private contractors, then after going through a transparent procurement process, the executive or the government of the day cannot instruct any private contractor to rehire the same workers who have been employed previously by other contractors. So in other words, we are saying it is simply not true. He is just putting that out there to appease the workers, and he is fully aware that those workers, there are no guarantee whatsoever that those workers are going to be re-employed by any reorganization of that program. And those union leaders who are involved in the government and who now form part of Kamala Prasad-Bissasa's cabinet, they know what this is all about, and they are prepared to sacrifice the interests of workers to meet their own political ends. We fully understand, and that's the reason why we in the PNM, we are doing what is necessary to defend those workers, because we understand that those union leaders are now fully compromised in the matter, and therefore they lack the moral authority right now to speak on behalf of workers, because workers' rights are now sacrificed on the altar of political expediency in Trinidad and Tobago as we speak.
So imagine you're trying now waking up, mommy are hungry, and mommy going in the cupboard looking to see what it have nothing, because in the snap of a finger, mommy get laid off on Friday and Monday morning she can't provide for her children, or daddy can't do anything. And let me tell you something, mental health is a serious thing that happening in this country. Some people know how to deal with it, some people don't know how to deal, and let me tell you, people have issues going on. And to add this on top of it, that is something different. Not everybody's strong enough to deal with it. That is it. People dealing with let me say for example, they can't afford to pay the rent. Landlord coming by the door. Yeah. Landlord knocking down your door. You can't afford to pay rent. They put in all your stuff at the side of the road. That is embarrassment. As you now said, the pending investigation, and we will get rehired. We can't say, landlord, we're going to get rehired. You could wait a month or 2 or 3. How long is that? It could be a month, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be 6 years.
What's your objective on the numbers out here today? Tell us what these numbers are.
We hope these numbers, these people, this is a stand. A cry for help. Not for a handout, for what we're working for the past couple of years. This is not a cry for, we're not begging. This is not, you see all these people that seen here, nobody here is begging. They're standing for what they're working for the past umpteen years, couple of years. We ain't say, we don't want a handout. We want the job that we signed up for. Thank you.
So I have one last story to give you all before we wrap up this evening. Back in the early 2000s, like around 2004, 2005 thereabouts, I was doing my master's at the University of West Indies. My cousin was working on her MPhil. I was in the Faculty of Humanities and Education. She was in the Faculty of Natural Sciences. And her area, she was looking at environmental stuff. And so as a result of that, we used to hang out a lot. I met some of the young postgraduate university students, and by that I mean they were people who had graduated already from the university with their masters in environmental sciences. And these persons were instrumental and a part of the setting up of the CPEP program. So one day we liming in a group on campus together, and I given the whole CPEP thing a lot of talk, right? Real bad talk in it, like, all these people doing is going around the place and whitewashing stones and whatever. And the guy, I believe if I remember it properly, his name is Shane. Shane, who was then working within the program, not as a contractor, not as a 10 days worker. He was part of the setting up of the policy. He explained it to me. He said, the point of CPEP, he said, and you know that there are different versions of CPEP all over the world, right? So various governments have used this particular template. You take people from a community and you employ them within the community to look after the community. So because it is a space that they live in, it is an environment that is important to them, they will feel invested in looking after the environment. These people that we like to look down on because we're thinking it's low-class black people doing these jobs are doing good work. Where I live in Diego Martin, I used to be able to tell you the time of the week based on hearing the teams outside my window, because they would be cleaning the main road in Diego Martin, and they would be cleaning the riverbanks and the parks and the grassy areas and verges that were nearby. That's not happening right now. My understanding, though, is the UNC has already tipped off their preferred contractors. But I want to get back to CPEP properly, because the way in which we have been talking about CPEP is almost as if we are ashamed of the program. And the reason we're talking about CPEP and CPEP workers and CPEP contractors as if it is something that needs to be ashamed of comes right back to this issue that we were talking about at the very start of the program. We see CPEP as a program for black people, and we always like to think that black people working is about handouts, because colonially the black group was the most marginalized group here. They weren't brought with contracts. They didn't sign on a contract to say, I'm going to be paid so much and so much money for a certain number of years, and then when the contract done, are likely to get a piece of land or are likely to get passage back home from wherever it is I was kidnapped from in West Africa, Western Central Africa, sorry. No. The majority of the black population in the Caribbean would have been trafficked, brought here, not paid, labor extracted from them. And historically, we continue to believe that black people don't deserve jobs and black people don't deserve dignity. So in an environmental program, because that's what CPEP is, it is an environmental program. It allows people to keep the environment clean, to maintain it, to sustain it, to earn from doing these things. And so, in getting from the program, they're able to give back to their community. And we here think that African descended people don't deserve even that. And I am not saying that it's only African descended people working in the program. I am saying that the message that has been sent by this sitting UNC government is that it's only black people who are working in CPEP, when that is not the case. You have people from a range of ethnicities, and you have people from a range of communities that are working in these CPEP teams. You notice I'm not using the word gangs, because they're not referred to as gangs, CPEP teams. And you have an entire ecosystem of workers, the people who are doing the actual cleaning and attending to the environment, the people who are overseeing them, who are the field officers, the people who are the contractors, the people who have to get the equipment together for them, and then of course the people who are doing the administrative work in the office. It is an entire ecosystem. And Kamla Prasad Bisesa, counting on our anti-blackness, counting on our attitude towards black people, counting on our disgust and hate and denigration of black people, decides the first large group of people should go in and fire, mass, purge them out as CPEP workers, because she knows that in the middle class parts of Trinidad and Tobago, we don't actually care about black people. In the middle class part of Trinidad and Tobago, we wish that black people could disappear and we had to see them. We don't have a problem with the services they provide, right? Especially in the various aspects of the service sector. So, fast food restaurants, janitorial service, clean up here, clean up there. We don't have a problem with them doing that, but we don't want to see them and we don't think they should earn money for that. That is our attitude towards black people in this country. And that's because we have anti-black attitudes towards work and service and sustainable living in this country. Or they could fight amongst all yourselves about that. There is nothing you can say to convince me otherwise. So, it might come across as if Kamala's approach to firing 20,000 plus people is strictly anti-black. It isn't. There is more to it. If you remember, if you throw your mind back, about a week into the general elections loss, right? So about a week after we changed government, there was a video that circulated. And it was a video of Wayne Sturge standing up in a basketball court in the constituency that he had just won, Toko Sani Grande. And he was talking to people. And he was talking to people about fulfilling promises. And he was talking to people about fulfilling promises and about getting jobs. Within that first week, there was also video circulating of people having gone to URP offices in Sani Grande, I think, and like just swarming in the office because they were told that they could get jobs. You see that 20,000 firing, that purge? The UNC government has fired upwards of 20,000 people because they are under pressure to keep their promise to the various groups that they got into bed with for votes. So that's what's going on. One, their approach is steeped in anti-blackness, but don't get it twisted. 2 weeks before CPEP people were fired, there were persons from communities that are associated with criminal activity that started going around saying, in a couple weeks' time, we are going to be the new contractors. I've heard that this week here, contractors were told to show up to collect their packages, right, to apply to become contractors. So there's already a changing of the guards. Kamala and her government couldn't wait for people's contracts to naturally expire because they are under pressure from their voter base to begin to honor their promises. And when you have gotten into bed with people who could create havoc and mayhem, you are forced to create a particular type of havoc and mayhem yourself to avoid other kinds of havoc and mayhem. So I am hopeful that the PNM's legal action actually works. I'm hoping that it can actually work, that the injunction gets filed, and that the courts decide that what has happened cannot be allowed to happen. But mark my words, if that injunction is successful and the current contractors and workers get to hold on to their jobs, the sitting government is going to be under heavy pressure. Because in that video, remember Sturge was promising young men who didn't have maths and English the opportunity to work in the army. So you were basically telling people who have qualifications, we're going to get you into particular jobs, which I found was an odd thing. And then a couple weeks later, all of a sudden, mass firings across the board in a number of places because promises were made and people have shown up to say, time for you to pay back on your promises. So what we have to look out for now is who being hired to fill some of these positions. Because remember, 2010 to 2015, that 63-month term in office, false papers was a huge part of what took place. So I think in the upcoming weeks, it's not just going to be mass firings that we're hearing about. We are also going to start to hear that the people being hired to fill these positions don't have the qualifications, or the qualifications have suddenly changed overnight to accommodate people who don't meet the previous requirements. So we have to stay alert, and we also have to be our brother's keepers. So there's a lot that we have to do to keep the pressure on, because, as I pointed out earlier, Kamala is avoiding accountability. She's not going to allow herself to be held to account in a press conference. You would have noticed as well that in the parliament, the speaker is blocking for her. And I intend to sit down and do a deep dive into the speaker and the speaker's habits in the parliament at some point in time. I just need to get my, information together. But you are going to have to pay attention to those things. She's avoiding accountability in the parliament. She's avoiding accountability in post-cabinet press conferences. She is avoiding accountability in news stories, as are all of her ministers. So we have to keep pushing back. And to all of the persons that have been providing me with information through various channels, I thank you, because it has helped me to keep them on their toes. I know that when I put up my posts, people is be getting gas pain, and that's all right. It have orange peel tea for that. So folks, this is where I am going to wrap things up, and we go see each other soon, right? Have yourselves a good evening, and thank you so much for joining me.
So don't be late, the truck and them can't wait. We are things to celebrate.